Here's a nice gray fox trail going through the mud, and each one of these tracks, or what looks like one track, is actually a set of two. So let's look a little bit closer at gray fox tracks. So these gray fox tracks are a front track overlapped by a hind track. This smaller, narrower one with the really tiny pad right here that's very hard to see, all you really see is a bit of fur marks there in the mud. That's the hind foot, and it landed on top of the front foot, which is a little bit wider and longer than the hind on gray foxes and canines in general. So in this case, you're not seeing any claws, and there's a large misconception in tracking that if you don't see claws, it has to be a feline, but that's not true. That's just a misconception. Dogs and foxes, coyotes, they don't always leave their claws. So you will find tracks where there's no claw marks, and in this case there's not even a hint really of claw marks, and it's in mud. So hind on top of front there. Here is a hind next to a front, and this one narrower, a little bit more pinched at the tip than this. This one's wider, more rounded in appearance. That one on the right is your front track, and that's the hind track. There is a lot of fur on this foot. You can see imprints of the fur in the mud right there, which is kind of cool. So here we have on the left side the left front track, and here is the left hind track on top of it. And in this case you can see claw marks, but they're really small, very far ahead of the toes compared to other canines. In this case there's a claw mark right here from this front toe that is, leading toe of the hind foot left that claw mark on top of the front track. So got to kind of keep track of where you are here, literally. This right in here is the claw mark from that toe right there. So that is the right front and the right hind track. They're overlapping in the trail, and the animal is moving in a fast gait. It looks like a what we call a direct register trot. And direct register means basically that the tracks are falling on top of each other. In this case, not right on top of each other. This one looks a little bit more like direct register almost, where the hind track almost covers the front track, but not quite. The hind track is smaller, so it's not really going to be able to cover the front track. Sometimes it lands right in it, and it's very difficult to make out the hind track, but in this case, they are separated enough that you can make out the two tracks. There's a large difference between the groupings here, and they're in a straight line. And the reason that animals travel in this direct register trot is it's very, it saves them energy. So you think about an animal that lives out here in the woods, they're trying to survive, and they have to hunt for their food. They can't just go down to the store and buy their food like we can. So they have to be worried about conserving their energy and not wasting their energy in a lot of excess action. And so they will trot because that's a very efficient gait for canines, especially the gray foxes. When I see these guys on trail cameras, they're almost always trotting. Sometimes they're walking, but not always. And they use that gait because it's energy efficient for them. And they can cruise along for quite a long distance in that gait, and it saves them energy. So if you're an animal trying to survive, that's the name of the game. You don't want to use excess calories if you don't have to. Okay, let's talk for a moment about gray fox versus red fox. Gray fox and red fox both have furry feet. Gray fox tends to be a little bit more small, narrow, oval looking. The front track of a red fox will have a bar in the heel that does not always show up. The red fox tracks have a huge amount of negative space, which I don't see that much negative space in gray fox tracks. The negative space is the space in between the toes that is not the track. So you have the pad and you have the toes and you have the space in between that we call negative space. So to tell those apart when they share the range, it can be a little bit difficult, but look for the bar in the heel. That helps a lot. There's a lot more fur, I think, on the feet of a red fox versus a gray fox. And habitat, I think, can be kind of a clue too. So just use all those clues when you share a range with the two species.